everyone. My name is Shashray McCormack. I am a district resource teacher in DEP for Zone 2 schools. And I was asked to come here and speak a little bit regarding the R tool. First, I would like to say that this is not a quick fix. This is not something, I know oftentimes teachers want something real quick to fix the issues, but I think this tool is really a moment of being able to reflect on how you have created lessons and how to move forward with creating lessons differently than you have. So there is definitely a lot of identity work that needs to take place as we are looking into and spending time with the R tool. So we're going to move forward because we only have a few minutes, and I want to make sure that those who may have questions can ask questions.
All right. Moving forward, I will share the R tool, but I think it would be wise for me to share the NTI version of that. So maybe before we jump into that, Shashray, we want to talk about maybe what the R tool does for audience, for PLC users or for AICs who are supporting this kind of work, or just that collectively as a staff, there's an awareness of what it is, that it exists. And really, in some ways, it can pair nicely with the EMPT for our principals in the audience today. So we are hoping that it is a tool that does a lot of the things that you do see on the screen. Ultimately, we want to constantly be examining curriculum with a very critical lens, not just as adults, but allowing our students to do the exact same thing. They're not empty. They come to us with so much. And so when we allow them to grapple with the real world in our classrooms, when we allow them to develop the critical thinking skills that they need today, tomorrow, and in the future, then we want to be able to ground that work for our PLCs and our planning groups. So we're not avoiding conversations about race. We're including them. We are giving ourselves and our students the tools to have these conversations.
I would also like to say too, I noticed on this slide, it says decrease misbehavior. I would even challenge even just using that. I did not create this slide, but I'm not for sure if that's something that I would have added there. And improve achievement. I think that we really need to look at what achievement looks like. Because oftentimes the achievement that is spoken of is from a very Eurocentric lens. So this is not this is not going to be a feel-good moment, but this is a moment where we're really going to have to do a lot of grappling and a lot of reflecting regarding what we are doing with our lessons. And I strongly suggest that you maybe even take a lesson that you have used before and look at it and kind of go through using this R tool to see if you have been complicit in some of the Eurocentricity of what the curriculum is.
And I think you make such an important point about the usefulness of this tool. It can be used to, I won't say retrofit a lesson, but you can take an existing lesson and walk it through the various components of the R tool, which we'll display here in a moment, and ask, what has this contributed to in the past? Has this actually served every student in my room? Or has it left some folks out? Has it continued to allow certain stereotypes and beliefs to exist? So I think to that third bullet point, absolutely, what is misbehavior? That's absolutely in the eye of the beholder. And if we're not going to check the lens through which we see our world, then we are heading down a very slippery slope. So continuing with what the R tool is intended to do, of course, we're looking to improve achievement for all of our students, but particularly those Black and Brown students who have probably felt very left out of the current curriculum and instructional choices that are being made. We hope that more and more of our Black and Brown students see that there's a path that might include them in the future as being an educator and being somebody who does challenge curriculum and who does act as a beacon of light for so many who haven't had the light shown on them. And then, of course, no matter the demographics of our classroom, we want to consistently and frequently enlighten all the students in our classroom, but we want people who are white to recognize that there is worlds and worlds of unlearning and relearning that needs to occur. Shashray, I'll let you continue as I pull open that link.
I'm sorry?
I'm going to pull open the R2 one-pager
Okay.
as it relates to NTI so that the crowd can see it. Elaine, you might let me know if this isn't being displayed. Can we see it?
I can see it perfectly.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So Shashray, we developed this in the spring. Can you walk participants, audience members through content integration, how you might use this truncated version of the R tool?
So again, this is the work that a lot of people need to do individually, because if you don't do any type of identity work heading into using these R tools, then it's really not going to be beneficial, because again, this is not a checkbox really. Even though you're looking here and you see the yes or no, when I say checkbox, I'm talking about the use of the R tool is not something that you like, okay, I need to get through this and get this done. This is really a good time to do a lot of reflection. So when we're looking at, content integration as the first part of it, what kind of books are you using? We know that when we first started in this position, there were many schools that did not have books that were reflective of their students. And are you going to allow students to have time to look at others' experiences as well as their own? I mean, we are right now, Louisville, Kentucky is the epicenter for social justice as we think about the murder of Breonna Taylor. Are you going to be able to allow students to have those conversations in their classroom? Because guess what? They're going to be ready to come with that. And also, and whether it's, virtually or rather if it's in the classroom. So there have been a lot of books and materials and resources that teachers have used that have this kind of colorblind approach to having the conversations about things like social justice or race. But teachers have to be willing to make sure that they have examples of books that are reflective of their students in the classroom.
Absolutely. So while this does appear yes, no, it's not checking something out of compliance. It's really digging deeper and making sure that you are finding ways to do exactly what the question is asking. And again, in the larger version of the ARE tool, it has multiple ways to look at content integration and how to begin doing that in part of our planning process. So for principals in the audience, as you're looking to, consider what you might put in your EMPT, content integration is a place where, if you are using this R tool, then consider the shifts that your staff is taking to start doing this. Begin asking the questions, what are you doing, staff, to do this? Please make sure I'm aware of that so that we can highlight that in our EMPT, our Equity Monitoring Progress tool. So then looking down at the next section, we have knowledge construction. And it asks, are you helping students understand bias through inquiry? So we need to establish foundational understandings of terms like bias, like racism, microaggressions, Black Lives Matter. We are constantly asking our students to examine the world around them and help them to build context around their own experiences, their own viewpoints, their own racial identities, their own cultural input that they receive from the world daily. And we're giving them the opportunity in our classrooms to build their knowledge as it relates to the very world that surrounds them. So moving students past worksheets and depth of knowledge 1 and 2 questions and really giving them opportunities to, like Shashray said, grapple, to talk, to have discourse, to have effective and respectful pushback of each other, so that more and more truth and understanding in history is revealed and dug up and analyzed and reanalyzed before students come to a singular conclusion about anything. So again, when we consider how principals, you might look at knowledge construction within the R tool as a way to document what's going on in your building regarding the EMPT. We need to be aware of how our PLCs are planning. We need to be aware of the activities and lessons that our students are being engaged in, and to maintain that pulse so that across the entire building, students are being given multiple opportunities to question their world, to question bias, to ask the questions that they need to ask in order to really find context, personal context in their world.
Ladies, we do have a question from the chat.
Thank you.
We have Stacy Rowan. She says, what systems will we put into place to ensure that these things are happening in all schools?
That is absolutely a leadership question. And for those of you who had an opportunity to listen to Paul Gorski, he did make it clear that if you are having some of the bias and some of the racial issues within your schools, then that is leadership. And that goes from the top to the bottom. And leadership has to be held accountable regarding that, because he also talked about having the colorblind perspective, and also for people who do speak out. He also talked about they're named as troublemakers, but just like the late John Lewis said, we just have to be good trouble.
Thank you so much for answering that question. And again, anybody has a question, make sure that you put that in the chat for us.
And thank you, Elaine, for calling that to our attention. Shashray, would you like to move into prejudice elimination, please?
I would love to. So as we talk about prejudice eliminations, this is a good conversation to have, because prior, where we took these ideas in the R tool were from a equity framework. And originally the equity framework said prejudice reduction, but we decided to change the term to elimination because that's what we want to do. So this is at the point where we are really tearing down a lot of the racist attitudes that we have found in our curriculum. So you have to intentionally plan your lessons in order to grapple with those things like bias and stereotypes, because there are still teachers that are really not even understanding what racism is. All they know is they want to be able to say, I'm not racist. And we talk about the emotion of it, but we also need to talk about the histories of it. We have to see the humanity of our students coming into our classrooms and see them as human beings, and them being able to co-create lessons with the teachers, so that that there is a type of truth and a type of comfort in the space where students can be able to speak to what their experiences are being Black and brown in the district and dealing with what is happening, because COVID-19 has just intensified what Black and brown kids have already been experiencing in our schools. So you have to intentionally plan your lessons with looking at what's happening in the world, what's happening locally, and what is even happening in your school building.
I think that mentioning the very real impact that COVID-19 has had on, at minimum, exposing the extreme differences between, who has come down with the condition, and by and large, it's people in communities of color, And so we can't ignore that reality, and kids are going to come to us with questions, and they're looking to us to be leaders and to be able to have conversations that are not always comfortable, but we got to get past that, and we've got to find ways to engage our students and give them the opportunities to work through this. And as instructional leaders, we have the tools and skill sets to do that. So it's time to start calling upon those. I think that transitions really well to equitable pedagogy, where we're looking at how we approach teaching and learning, and what are we doing to make modifications to our strategies, to the way we arrange our classrooms, to the activities we put forth, to the supports that we provide, whether we're teachers or in support roles or on an instructional leadership team. We have got to continue to seek out ways and employ ways to facilitate exactly what it says, to facilitate academic achievement of underrepresented societal groups.
So we have another question real quick.
We cannot fix a problem that we refuse to name. There's no way we can fix a problem that we refuse to name.
Correct.
Absolutely. Shashray, do you mind to let us know what and explain the meaning of BLM for clarification purposes?
Explain what again?
BLM. I know, but
Black Lives Matter.
Yes, Black Lives Matter. So Stacy Rowan had that question. She wanted to make sure that we were all under the understanding of what it meant. So thank you.
Yes, Black Lives Matter. And that should not be something that teachers should be scared to have a conversation about, because trust and believe kids are going to be ready to have those conversations.
And if you are experiencing discomfort or confusion, or, oh my gosh, I don't know where to begin, trust that there's an entire department that's willing to help you. I know Shashray would probably tell you that a Google search is one of the best things you can do to immediately try to answer a question and do your research and take advantage of the knowledge and resources that exist out there. But you have an entire team of resource teachers that work in DEP who can guide you towards some of these resources as well. But we've got to take charge of our own learning and our own unlearning and relearning in this process as well. Our kids don't just deserve it, but it needs to be folded into the way that we construct school and co-construct school with our kids. So we have to ask our kids, how do you learn? What is it that you want to learn about? How can you demonstrate mastery in a way that reflects who you are? If I'm not meeting your needs, tell me how and why. And if I screw something up, ask me to, or I will ask you to please help me figure this out. Help me move forward with you. So that requires a huge dose of humility. It requires a huge dose of vulnerability on the part of the adults. But our kids want this. They deserve this. They're yearning for us to guide them, and they're yearning for us to work with them as we unpack the events of the past several months, and arguably, of course, several centuries of events to unpack.
And I love, Rachel, I love the fact that you guys are, it's okay to not know the question or the answer. And what's not okay is to not even ask. So we just need to make sure that we open up our hearts to learning and growing, and then we will model that for our students. Awesome.
Yes,
absolutely. And it's not always necessarily meeting people where they are, because that's what has gotten us to where we are, continually trying to meet people where they are. We're going to have to really hit this head on. And there's going to have to be some very hard and difficult conversations. And yes, there may be some things that you ask that you're scared to ask, but then you have to ask yourself, why are you scared to ask that question?
Right. And Sharvita West says in the chat, she says, just make sure that Google search is a credible source.
Oh, please.
We always know, and I think as educators, we understand that for sure. But like you said, we have a whole department. So you can even just reach out to you guys and make sure that you feel confident that you know exactly where the source is definitely credible.
Certainly.
And again, there's identity work here, because sometimes it's sometimes you can't help a person fix their broken selves. That's something that they might have to look deeper inside and see what needs to happen inside of them.
You are right. Shashray, as we near the end of our half hour, you have empowering classroom culture. And as you work through that, I will then return to the original slide deck.
Yes. So as we talk about empowering classroom culture, this is an important section where we need to be sure to be inclusive of our families and communities as well. Oftentimes we forget the power of our parents and the communities in which our students come from. So I think it's very, very important that that as we talk about this specific descriptor, is being able to have an environment where students are safe and students are willing to trust you in their conversation, because kids, they can tell a fake and a phony, right? They could tell if you're truly concerned or if you really are ready to have the conversations. But I think that empowering the classroom culture is a very important piece to look at as we think about collaboration. Collaboration is very important in order to empower the classroom culture, because I think that, you know, oftentimes teachers are kind of type A, and they want all the power, and I mean, I was a teacher. So I think we have to be willing to share that power in the classroom with both our parents and with our students.
So as we kind of wrap up with the overview of the ARE tool, the Affirming Racial Equity tool, I want to call your attention to the slide that I'm displaying, where much like the ARE tool, it should be living, it should be breathing, it should be functional, it shouldn't be a checklist. It should be something that we use side by side that consistently guides our work toward racial equity. It should demonstrate our commitment toward it. So as we commit ourselves to all of the different shifts that were just previously described, your EMPT principles and APs, this is a document that should highlight your work, your efforts, the shifts that you are making as you commit to racial equity. It should show what you're doing. It should defend why you do it. And there should be proof and evidence as to why, or as to how Black and Brown students are being affected in a positive manner, how we are looking to improve outcomes for them.
And Rachel, we have a question in the chat. Where can we find or get the ARE quick one-pager to download and share it with the staff?
That I will double check that it is on the DEP page, but that is something that I don't know if it would be beneficial to resend that out to area superintendents to get to their zones, or maybe we can get that to AICs. I will bring that to my team's attention and we will get that distributed.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
One more thing that I may have not been clear about while looking at this document. This is not a document that you're going to be able to touch on every single aspect of it, but it really is a document for you to be reflective on your teaching practices, on your lessons, and again, on your own beliefs around what curriculum should look like for your students. So even though the document may look and seem overwhelming because there are a lot of parts and descriptors to it, but it is really a way for you to begin to think differently about how you plan your lessons and what are in the lessons. Because we all have plenty of research. The research tells us this and the research tells us that. But this is the moment for us to really take some actionable steps on making sure that we are connecting with our students.
You are right. We've got to constantly consider them and make our decisions from those considerations. We've got to start with the kids. And Shashray will continue to tell you that there has to be a lot of introspection and personal reflection and growth. I think my last note here is that we have to engage in parallel processes. I think that is a Paul Gorskiism as well, where you got to do a lot of me work, a lot of personal work, but you can't forget that there's got to be some larger work that's going on as well, where you're engaging with your staff and your PLCs, and arguably, at the district level, we've got to work on ourselves as much as we're working on larger systems to make improvements in the here and now. It has to be, we are long overdue. So these shifts need to be occurring ASAP.
Thank you, ladies.
Yes.